You would think with the current condition of immigration in the United States that people who ain't got their papers would be keeping a low profile, but in today's video we're going to look at people in Tampa who are completely crashing out despite the fact they're not US citizens. Of course, not all people crashing out are undocumented. The most notorious case out of Tampa this week was an individual who killed a young man over what appeared to be an argument out of vehicles. But if I told you that a good percentage of the people being arrested in Tampa right now weren't undocumented people, I'd be lying to you, because undocumented people really are crashing out heavy in the city of Tampa right now. Like this Cuban national who was recently arrested in Tampa for stealing fuel with fake credit cards. He's got out-of-county warrants. You can see all his charges right here. Now this individual is involved with a Cuban crime syndicate that sets up skimmers at gas stations so they can steal people's credit card information, which they then use to steal fuel, which they sell to people that drive semis and dump trucks. As bizarre as that sounds, this is a really common thing that happens here in Florida, and it's usually Cuban nationals behind these networks. This has been going on since like the late 90s into the 2000s, and somehow law enforcement in Florida still hasn't been able to find a way to prevent these people from doing these crimes. In fact, it seems like every day these criminals develop new methods of extracting the fuel, which they sell to people that drive semis. This young man right here is an Iraqi national. Now, he's actually a student in the Tampa area, so it's possible that he has a student visa. Well, he was recently arrested for staging a brawl or a fight event. Now, I'm pretty sure that's probably normal behavior in his home country, but probably not legal in Tampa. This woman from Venezuela was arrested for strangulation. Seems like another really common charge that people from other countries are getting these days. Particularly Brazilians, Cubans, and Venezuelans like to choke people out. This man is also a Cuban, and he's also got some weird fuel-related charges. He's got out-of-county warrants for grand theft over $5,000, fraudulently getting fuel, and other physical evidence type charges. Here's a Venezuelan with a DUI, and then there's also a Cuban guy with a DUI. Now, most of the time these individuals could be legally in the United States, like permanent residents, but these days anybody can get a Haitian deportation if you're not a US citizen. Now, Hillsborough County does not specify if they're citizens or not on their arrest logs. What they say is the place of birth. Most Cubans, Haitians, and a lot of Dominicans are going to be U.S. citizens, even though they were born in another country. So we don't really know if they're citizens or not. What we do know is that their charges many times reflect their legal status, like individuals who are arrested with no valid driver's license from countries like Salvador and Honduras and Mexico are almost always going to be undocumented. Failure to appear, Mexican national, no valid driver's license out of the small town of Wilmama. This individual right here, Javier, he's Mexican national, no valid driver's license. This individual here is from Honduras. He has no valid driver's license. Then there's a Cuban guy right here with no valid driver's license. And finally, another Cuban with a failure to appear for no valid driver's license. The failure to appear is because they know that when they go to court, there's a chance that they could get deported, so they don't show up to their court hearing. You have a lot of people who entered the United States legally under temporary status. A lot of them were becoming residents and then U.S. citizens through that legal process. That doesn't exist anymore. So if there's people that came during that period and they're on a temporary status, it's now being revoked. Those individuals are most likely going to get a deportation when they go to court. However, they always have the option to use an Uber. The ones who decide to drive with no valid driver's license, they're pretty much kind of making their own decisions at that point. There's a lot of people who are in this metropolitan area of Tampa, and I Uber drive here. Let me tell you, in the morning, it's nothing but Haitians, for example. A lot of them don't have a driver's license because they're under temporary status. They use an Uber. You don't see too many Haitians getting arrested for that. They use the brain that they have on their head to make good decisions, like using an Uber for transportation and not getting arrested for no valid driver's license. Talking about Haitians, this individual right here is from Haiti. He was arrested for threatening to hurt somebody. This woman from Venezuela was charged with battery, so she likes to put her hands on other people. Particularly for Venezuelans and Brazilians, this is a far too common charge in this metropolitan area. They always seem to get involved in some type of domestic disputes. usually in apartment complexes. And these apartment complexes always have police scenes out there because people, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, Brazilians, are always having domestic disputes between each other. Even though they're undocumented in the United States, it would make sense that they would keep a low profile and not draw too much attention, but they ain't got that much common sense. This woman right here, who I believe is Russian, was arrested for a controlled substance and, of course, resisting arrest. Now, the country codes that they use internationally are not the same country codes that they use in Florida when they arrest you. Florida law enforcement uses their own codes, and you have to decipher them. So sometimes I can be wrong on these. It's just trying to guess which country code it is. In the case of this one, it's RA. I'm going to guess that's going to be Russia. But it could also be Romania. Like I said, law enforcement in Florida doesn't use the international code. They have their own code, and many times we just have to guess what that code stands for. Like this man right here, I believe he's Middle Eastern. I believe he might be Yemenis. I'm not exactly sure. His charges are pretty serious. False imprisonment of a child, armed false imprisonment, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. A lot of times people don't realize that when they pull out a weapon, it makes their crimes like that much more serious. They think because of the way the state laws are presented by many people in law enforcement that they just have the right to whip out an arm whenever they feel like it. But that's not exactly the way law works in Florida. Florida used to have a 1020 life law previously, which worked very well for the state of Florida. I have no idea why they changed these laws, but Florida's gun laws were great, and it really was like people in Florida knew not to commit crimes with guns because it was a very heavily penalized law. But in the last few years, they've changed their gun laws in Florida, and we've seen homicide, shootings, road rage, and all types of incidents along those lines that previously people were terrified of committing, definitely becoming rampant now in Florida. Alongside with a misinformation campaign from law enforcement agencies, which have led to the arrest of a lot of individuals in Florida who committed very serious crimes thinking that they were entitled to brandish a weapon when in fact they were committing a very serious offense by doing so. So don't think that Florida is a state that the presumption that they give you or the image that they give you on the news and the media and stuff like that, don't think that's really the case out here. You pull out a gun in Florida, the laws are on the books, you're going to get some serious punishment. So right now in Florida, a lot of people are getting arrested, like that Uber driver in Hollywood, who think they're not doing anything wrong, not realizing that they're committing a very serious crime by brandishing a weapon. Most of the time, it's going to be considered an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Mexican national from Sarasota was arrested in Tampa for battery. She went all the way up to Tampa to hit somebody. Personally, I'm just glad she took her violent behavior to Tampa and didn't do that type of stuff here in Sarasota because we want to enjoy peace and tranquility out here. Cuban national Oldani was arrested in Hillsborough County for violating an injunction for a domestic violence dispute. 3 charges for battery and then tampering with a witness. This is a problem that a lot of Cuban nationals are facing, is the fact that after they commit a crime, they don't really realize that you can't be antagonizing the victim, or you can't be calling a woman who doesn't want to talk to you after a woman presses charges on you, she's no longer interested in you. They just don't get how the legal system works. This guy reminds me of Chocolate MC. He's a Cuban rapper. He's been here for 8 years and has 9 arrests, and he just doesn't learn his lesson. And these are the types of charges that they be picking up. Type of charges where you're like, dude, you're in the United States of America. If the police tells you not to bother somebody and you go bother them, you're going to get arrested. And you're going to be getting arrested back to back for domestic issues. And well, this is kind of a trap for people who are undocumented that don't understand that in the United States, once law enforcement gets involved, you better follow those directions. Then you have this Honduran national. Now, he was arrested for failure to appear for no valid driver's license after being ordered by the court that he shouldn't be driving, 2 aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon, and of course, possession of a weapon while doing a felony. He's in for a world of trouble. This man right here is a Mexican national. He was arrested for battery. Then you got this young lady right here. Now, she's a U.S. citizen. She was arrested for trafficking in fentanyl. I mean, she has an onslaught of criminal charges. There wouldn't be enough time to read all this, but basically she had some fraudulent use of identification, some drug charges. I mean, she's got quite a few charges there. It seems like always in most of these cities, including Tampa, the worst crimes committed are usually U.S. citizens. There's a level of boldness that you get when you're not afraid of getting deported. This man right here is Dominican. He's got 3 charges of exposing organs. He also tried to escape the police while resisting without violence. So quite the number of charges there. I believe this dude right here is Costa Rican. Now, he was arrested for a few charges. Among them, he had possession of a controlled substance, paraphernalia, driving with no license, and of course, the herbal essence. Now, technically, the country code for Costa Rica is CC, but the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Agencies use CC to denote Cuban, Cuban, or MM for Mexican, Mexican. So Costa Ricans, when they get arrested, it kind of becomes kind of confusing because then they'll give them a CR, which could also mean Croatian by country code. So, like I said, they don't really use the proper country codes. It's a complete just guessing work here. Cuban national, he had controlled substances and other drug-related charges. Cuban national arrested for battery. All right, everybody, so those are the arrests from just 2 days of individuals who are likely undocumented. Now, again, we're not 100% sure on these people's legal statuses. All we get from the Hillsborough County is their place of birth. A lot of these individuals could be U.S. citizens who made bad decisions and they're not deportable. So we don't really know their legal status. A lot of counties in Florida do provide us with that information, but in the case of Hillsborough County, they only tell us their place of birth. But without a doubt, some of the individuals on today's video will be getting deported because in the state of Florida, most people who are undocumented, who get arrested, do eventually within a month or two or a few weeks end up getting deportation orders. For individuals who have committed more serious crimes, especially those related to like enriching themselves basically through fraudulent means, a lot of times law enforcement agencies will prolong their deportations to deplete them of resources before they get deported. For example, like let's assume that these Cuban guys that had the fuel situation going on were not legally in the United States, they're deportable. Well, those individuals would then have the possibility to be sitting on a lot of money. After all, they were running a pretty serious criminal enterprise. If the law enforcement agencies detain these individuals have any common sense, they'll probably prolong the deportation to kind of drain them of resources, have extra time to do some extra investigative work, perhaps trying to get them to divulge other people in their networks, or of course just the general idea of draining them from the resources with lawyer fees and other legal fees or subsequent arrest. The idea is if an individual is in the United States and they're making all this money illegal and you deport them, then they go back to their home country with a lot of money. So the idea is to kind of prolong their stay in the United States to drain their resources. So when they do get deported, they don't go back with a lot of money they stole from the United States. That's why many times individuals like this don't just get deported right off the bat. If it's something simple, no valid driver's license, whatever, you're gone. It's not a big deal. But I think a lot of times cases like this, people wonder, why don't these people get deported right off the bat? It's because these individuals most likely need to be drained of their financial resources before they get deported. In other words, you can't just come over here, make all this money illegally, and then get deported with a crap load of money. That's not the way that system works. So that's why many times individuals that commit like more serious crimes, they make sure that they deplete their resources before they get deported. And that's just my own personal opinion. I can't really prove that, but that's the way I think it happens. Thank you so much for watching today's video. These are the undocumented people crashing out on the streets of Tampa.